and welcome to this episode of Who Gets the China, where, as you know, we are trying to save our sanity while caregiving for our aging parents. And something that has been brought to my attention by a couple different listeners is that there's a category of people that aren't in touch with their parents, but their parents are still aging. And so this brings up a different set of feelings and challenges. And so I thought it would be really great to talk about those. And my dear friend, Jacqueline, has offered to be our guest today and talk us through some of the unique things that happen when you're not in touch with your aging parents. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So we've talked a lot about the struggle of being a caregiver for aging parents, right? But a lot of families don't fit the traditional mold for whatever reasons. And some people are estranged or disconnected from their loved ones. So I wanted to talk about your experience and share, whatever you feel comfortable with, helping us understand how it looks in your life dealing with aging parents that you're not in touch with. I know your dad had passed away some years ago, and your mom lives in the same state, but not super close by. And I know that you haven't been in touch with her for a while. So, do you just want to give a little bit of background about how long you kind of haven't been in touch with them? And do you have contact with other members of your family, just to kind of give us a little bit of background?
Sure. So I broke ties with my family in autumn of 2009. So it's been 16 years. And I really appreciate this topic. I'm glad that you're covering this topic because I feel like it's one that a lot of people avoid discussing. Um, a lot more people are estranged from their families than I ever realized until I went down that road.
So, you have some contact with a sister-in-law and a little bit of contact with some nieces and nephews. So, do you still get information about your mom from them?
I do get information about my mom, sometimes from my aunt. It's my one of my mother's younger sisters. I'm still in touch with her. She gives me a lot of timely information. And then my sister-in-law, I do get information from her. I guess I have two sisters-in-law right now, and I have three brothers. Two of them are married that I know of. One of them, I believe, is divorced, but I'm really only in touch with the one. And while that sister-in-law is willing to share information with me, we just simply don't see each other frequently or talk frequently. Occasionally by social media or texting, but and occasionally I hear things from the nieces who are grown up.
How old is your mom?
My mother is 86 years old now.
And how is her health? Do you know?
I Yeah, I hear from my aunt that she is declining. Um, when I've seen photos of her recently, I saw photos from the spring of her when I visited my aunt in South Carolina. She looked frail. She looked significantly older. Of course, I probably would look older to her too because I haven't seen her in 16 years.
Yeah.
But she does look frail and older than her sisters. One of her sisters is older than she is, and my mother, I think, has always looked like the oldest one, probably because she's not been kind to her body,
Hmm.
drinking and smoking. So I think that's why she looks even older to me.
So, does she ever do any outreach to try to get in touch with you?
She has not. No, I used to occasionally hear um, kind of like a message from her, not a direct message, through my aunt. She would say things like, well, she doesn't understand why you're not in touch with her. And that used to be a little triggering for me because it would kind of potentially make me feel a little guilty until I decided, I'm tired of feeling bad. So I sent my mother a short, direct letter in case she didn't know, which she claimed to not know why I wasn't in contact with her. So I kind of spelled it out for her, and sent her that letter. It's been quite a number of years now, and I never heard anything back from her, which I didn't expect to anyway. It was more just to get it off my chest, like, okay, well, since you don't seem to understand, let me lay it out for you. And yeah, she has not followed up from that.
That feels hurtful
Well,
or not.
yes, it does. I mean, in a perfect world, would it have been nice to hear something back like, I'm sorry? That would have
Yeah.
been the best case scenario. But as I've learned through lots of therapy, why should I expect my mother to be anybody other than who she is? And who she is someone who is not communicative, not expressive of emotions. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Which gets to the whole reason for how this came to pass in the first place.
Yes.
So it sounds like you don't really expect or foresee any kind of reconnection.
I don't have the desire. It seems highly unlikely. I can't picture a scenario where I would reach out. And I also can't picture a scenario where she would reach out. She doesn't strike me as someone who has regrets, or if she does, she doesn't strike me as someone who's willing to make amends with anyone. I don't think I've ever seen her do that with anyone in her life. So, yeah, it seems unlikely to me.
Yeah, it's conceivable, but unlikely.
Anything is possible, and I'm not ruling it out. As if I'm not saying I'll never talk to her again. It's more that um, I just can't picture it happening. But anecdotally, I've heard of people whose, parents celebrated their 90th birthday and kind of had a reconciliation with one of their prodigal children. So that's heartening to know that people are capable of change. I certainly don't expect it, but I know anything is possible.
What are some of the things that are unique to someone who's not in touch with their parent as their parent ages? Like, what are some of the feelings and emotions that come up?
There's a lot of feelings and emotions, and I don't want to judge them as good or bad emotions, but certainly a feeling of loss.
Hmm.
And for me, that is what might be called a limbo loss or ambiguous loss, ambiguous grief. And for me, that looks like loss of a mother I never really had. And it leaves me in a perpetual state of limbo in some ways, and there's no real closure. Um, so there's the grief, and some sorrow associated with that, which can lead to feeling isolated. It's not like when a parent passes and there's, a funeral and there's public recognition and support for that loss. It's um, it's grief that, well, it's just a different kind of grief, I guess you would say.
If a parent passes of a friend of mine, I'm going to reach out to them and send a condolence card and call them and check in on them because there's like a very specific event that's happened that triggers you as the friend of that person to reach out. But in your case, I mean, I haven't never thought to do something like that, but of course, you are experiencing this very long-term limbo, ambiguous grief. I see what you're saying because other people aren't acknowledging your grief because it wasn't an event.
Right. But I guess you'd say it's important for me to be mindful of that and aware and process it in a way that makes sense for me. I mean, there's part of me that feels like my mother's going to outlive everybody because, good old Billy Joel, he's saying only the good die young. And,
Yeah.
and I feel like my mother she probably doesn't want to share what she has accumulated over her lifetime. She's never been a very generous person. So I could see like her somehow clinging to, everything she has and holding on longer. Like I have joked that she'll outlive me. Um, And she's a stingy person. She's been stingy with money, but even, I mean, she's been stingy with her love. She's been
Hmm.
stingy with her emotions. So it's hard to picture her wanting to like bestow her estate onto, my brothers or anyone really.
The whole genesis for really who gets the china is this processing of your parents' stuff, right? Whether you want it or you don't, or they don't want to give it to you, or they can't bear to throw it out. It's the physical manifestation of your family's life and history together. And so in this case, your mom is stingy with love and things. How does it feel to not have things that are,
Well,
or like talk about that a little bit?
that's an interesting question. I hadn't put a lot of thought into, what is not going to be passed down to me that I might want or that I might feel is due to me, that I'm owed, which, I don't feel like I'm owed anything. The one thing, I guess, if I were to think of anything that I kind of wish I could have that I don't have access to or have, it would be photos of me as a child. That's not to say I don't have any. I have kind of very few of them. But to be honest, there were not a lot of photos of me anyway, because I was the fourth child of four children. So by the time they got to me, they just couldn't really be bothered to take a lot of photos of me, which I'm not trying to suggest that I'm unique in this situation. I think when parents have multiples, it's common
Yeah.
for the first kid to get lavished with all the attention and all the gifts and the presents and toys and things and the tens of thousands of photos and videos taken, and by the time they get to the last one, it's like, oh yeah, this is them in the hospital and this is them starting elementary school. And I mean, there's
And
there's a
here they
little
are
bit of a
graduating from
gap.
high school.
Yeah, right, there's a little bit of a gap. I mean, my
Yes.
mom didn't even take a picture of me graduating from high school. Like there's no cap and gown photo of me.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, I know. It's kind of boggles my mind. It's like just another moment when I see how other friends and their families, their lives have played out. Like, of course, you have the obligatory cap and gown picture. It's like, oh, that's funny. I don't have one of those.
Yeah.
But,
Oh,
and that's,
that's a
yeah.
lot
Yeah,
to
some
think
of that
about
I
that.
don't always realize until later. Like there were plenty of times I've had conversations with you, like when we were freshmen in college, like, oh, I guess it's not normal for parents to do XYZ, or like, I got there and your parents were moving you in and your sister was there. And it's like, oh yeah, my parents, where are your parents? They're not here. They went on a trip. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but as far as anything that I might think I want or need, there's really not much of anything. I don't need a lot of reminders of, the family I would have wished I had that I
Yeah.
didn't have. I have a handful of like childhood toys and but other than photos that would be nice to have. And if I had children, I might feel a little more strongly about this, like, oh, maybe they want to see pictures of me as a child, but so there's not that part of it.
When there's maybe more negativity, like, yeah, I can see that you're like, I don't want her stuff. Like I don't need it.
Yes, and to your point, though, I love the name of your podcast, "Who Gets the China." My mother did have a set of china, or probably still does. And as a child, and even maybe as a young adult, I would beg her at holidays, "Oh, please, can we use the china for Thanksgiving or for Christmas or whatever special occasion?" And there's not a single memory of us using her china. She never used it. It was on display, but never used it. So even though, like in a perfect world, again, I would think it would be nice to have that china, but it wouldn't have any memories associated with it of having used it.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean anything to you.
Right.
Yeah. Something I was thinking about as we were preparing for this conversation is that because of our age and where we are, whenever we get together, we are sharing funny stories, annoying stories, heartbreaking, whatever the stories may be about our parents, because we all have parents that are aging. And it got me wondering, you're really one of the best listeners I know of anybody that's in my life, and I really appreciate that about you. But how does it impact you when like we're all together sort of sharing the trials and tribulations that we're going through, but your experience is different?
Thank you for asking that. That's a really thoughtful question. Mostly, I feel like I'm dodging a bullet, you know, and so in a good way, like, whew, thank God I'm not having to deal with taking the keys away from my parents. But I think kind of what you were getting at, it can also feel isolating. Um, on on occasion, I can feel strangely left out of things. And it's not unlike how would feel in the past when our group of friends would talk about raising toddlers and the trials and tribulations of that, which, I know from having been a toddler, having babysat toddlers, that that's challenging, but I don't have children of my own. So I would feel left out. And that's not to say at all that anybody was trying to ostracize me or make me uncomfortable, because certainly not, but it's just another way where I have felt different from everyone, not like not normal, separate, other, that I'm different from my peers, which is something that has followed me throughout my life.
I completely understand that. It's like you're 1 degree removed, right? Because that's not your personal experience is different and you don't have quite the same shared experience.
Yeah, it's just kind of a reminder of how I didn't have that sense of belonging. I came from a family that wasn't small. I mean, I think of it as a large family, a family of six, four kids and two parents, but I never felt like I belonged. And so it is a little bit of a reminder of that.
Hmm.
But I try to reframe things, especially if I reflect back. I try to reframe things.
What kind of support has helped you process this or continue to process and keep this in perspective as we all age and as our parents age?
The unwavering support of my husband, Brad, and amazing friends like you, and also lots and lots of therapy. I have I've found other people along the way who have been able to fill some parental roles for me. I have a couple of mother figures and a father figure, and so I really lean on those relationships when it's appropriate.
Speaking of father figures,
Mhm.
so you also had not been in touch with your dad prior to his passing.
Yes, and I will try to keep that short because there's a lot I could say about that. But since we're talking about estrangement, I find it interesting that the the fact that my father was aging is the whole catalyst for me cutting ties with my family. And I'll explain that because that might sound a little weird or confusing. To make it short and sweet, my father died of dementia. He was showing signs of dementia for, years. He lived alone in Florida, so out of state with no real family or friends nearby. And when we would see him, I would notice a lot of classic symptoms, lack of hygiene, confusion, getting lost driving around. And I would bring this up with relatives, and I felt like things were coming to a head. So I called a family meeting, and one of my brothers who said he was going to be there didn't show up. Um, but one of my aunts did show up, my father's sister-in-law with her husband, my father's brother. And instead of getting on board and coming up with a plan, which my whole MO in this was to have my father seen by a doctor, seen by a professional who could diagnose, maybe he doesn't have dementia, but there's something going on. I don't know what it is. I'm not a doctor, but there's clearly something going on wrong. And they accused me of trying to have him committed to a psychiatric hospital over sour grapes from something that happened in childhood. Something I had confided in my aunt about that she ended up using against me.
Ugh,
And so she said, unless you repent, unless you apologize for what you've done, your father will disown you and he will write you out of his will. Not only did his health issues not get addressed, but I decided then and there, I was like, I'm not apologizing because I didn't do anything wrong. I'm the only one sounding the alarm here.
right.
And so this is on you all. You had your chance. I was here. I was here to help. I had done research. I was prepared to take the next steps. So ultimately, what happened is my father died alone, out of state, in a state he'd never lived in North Carolina, where he had no friends or family. And so he died there and in a memory care unit. So, like, that's better than what I was proposing,
I
which was
know.
to choose a place, like maybe while he could still have some input,
How
come
did
up
he
with a
end up in North Carolina?
that's information I don't know. I really couldn't say, but they have to live with that. That's on them.
Yeah.
I tried to handle it in a way I thought was humane and not even out of some feeling of love for my father, but out of some maybe misguided sense of duty or obligation, mainly as a good human being. It's the
Hmm.
right thing to do.
People just aren't thinking straight, or they're not seeing the reality of the situation, or they don't understand like people are trying to help, and they get so locked into their own view of the world and the stories they've been told or whatever that um, at the end of the day it's not helpful for anyone.
Right. I don't feel like they served him well. I don't feel like they that he had the best outcome that he could have had.
Do you feel like it's difficult to talk about with other people, or that it's just, you kind of alluded to this earlier, it's not really something that's frequently talked about? Why is that, I wonder?
Um, I have to really feel comfortable with someone and safe in speaking with them and confident that they're not going to judge me for having cut off my family ties. I've had people look at me like I had two heads when I told them I didn't talk to my family. I feel like I would be vilified if I
Mhm.
told everybody. Um, we're supposed to honor our mothers and fathers. That's what we learned in church growing up. So, what I'm doing is essentially violating one of the Ten Commandments. So I think some people, if they were to do the same thing, even if it was completely justified, I think that could lead to some moral injury, feeling like they were
Mhm.
going against their personal values. I've had to evaluate my values over time and practice self-care, and in this case, it means being estranged from my family.
I was at a seminar the other day, and the woman was talking about self-care and compassion for yourself as a caregiver, because oftentimes the expectations that we set for ourselves are really high and unrealistic. And
Yes.
caregiving can look a lot of different ways. And often we're not really prepared for the role of caregiver. And really talking about finding ways to show yourself that self-compassion and give yourself credit for doing the best you can. I mean, how does self-compassion help you navigate this situation?
I think that you have worked in the mental health space in times past, and currently I work in behavioral health. So it comes very naturally to focus on my own mental health. It helps to remember that I'm not alone, in looking at estrangement and trying to normalize it for myself, I learned that it's not at all uncommon. There are people who have been estranged from family members for periods of time. It's not always, a lifelong sentence. Sometimes it's just for, you know, during difficult times, people are estranged. But it is surprisingly commonplace. Seeing a licensed clinical social worker, counselor or therapist is very beneficial for me. I'm not sure that it works for everyone, but I definitely encourage people to reach out to professionals if they think that could be helpful to them. Self-care, for me, it looks like things like holidays can be tough. So I try to have something to look forward to, whether it's like my husband and I go out for a nice meal on Christmas Eve. It's kind of a tradition we've adopted over the years. Mother's Day is really difficult. So for self-care, um, I've gotten my husband, Brad, he gives me flowers every year for Mother's Day, sort of
Aw.
acknowledges that I'm like, a cat mom, but also that it's not Mother's Day is difficult for me. So it has been even when I was not estranged from my family. It's always been a challenge to shop for a card that is not overly saccharine and sickeningly sweet and that, you know, so it's hard to strike that balance. So it's a nice. I try not to focus on the difficult parts of Mother's Day, but more how I have mothers who fill that role for me in other ways and how I feel it for myself. It might be worth noting that I had taken a workshop many years ago before I was estranged from my mother. It was called Finding Mother Peace, and when I look back now on that workshop, I feel like I have been able in some ways to find that peace um, with my mother, at least, inside me.
Hmm.
Um, it, if nothing else, what I got out of that workshop, I've read the books, I've been in the groups, I've talked about my relationship with my mother ad nauseum over many years. And I can at least acknowledge that my mother is a woman outside of the fact that she's my mother. She was a woman before she ever had me. And, she had a life before she had kids and before she, became a mom. So for me, that's actually pretty big because it's hard to think of your mother as being anything other than your mother.
I know, it's so true. I think partly also something that's valuable for me in this conversation is that for my mom, like, and not to reveal her whole life, but like she was estranged from her dad. And for, I don't know, lots of complicated reasons that I don't even know if she understands. But I think it's really impacted her a lot in a lot of ways, but especially later in life too, as you're just grappling with things. And like, I don't think she was really ever to have the kind of reconciliation with him that she might have wanted. I mean, he did write her a letter and tried to kind of explain some of the things that went on, but it was like just too little too late, really. And I think for me, understanding why my mom struggles with, frankly, getting rid of stuff is partly due to some of the stuff that she's reconciling with her dad, right? So, like she says, like loss is just really hard for me, and even loss of things. And she'll say, like, I know it doesn't always make sense, but I think a lot of it is wrapped up in that history of, it's important to recognize somebody's history in understanding where they are now, and trying to respect how they got there and what they may or may not be ready to deal with.
I completely agree. And not everyone is going to extend that courtesy. So that's why I try to be mindful of who I open up to about these things.
I have two questions for advice. And
Okay.
one is, what would you advise to other people like me who are the friend of someone who is estranged from a parent as their parent ages? Like, what are things that I could do to be a better friend or understand the situation from your point of view? What are questions I could ask? How could I acknowledge it instead of pretending it's not going on?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think doing what you already do, which is listen without judging. You're a good listener. You actively listen and are open-minded. You don't judge. So it's helpful knowing that I'm free to express feelings that are not always easy to share. Before I became estranged from my family, I confided in my brother. I think it was the night before we were going to have this family meeting. And I said to him, look, I don't even love our dad, but I feel like we need to have this conversation because of XYZ. And I feel like that got used against me and still is used against me. Here I was confiding in a sibling to say, look, he has not been there for us. I don't think that's like a news flash. He remarried and moved far away, thousands of miles away, and had a new family, so to speak. Knowing that I can confide in a friend and not feel judged for saying things like, I don't love my father. That is important because there's not a lot of people I would say that to unless, well, there's just not that many people I feel comfortable sharing that with. Here I am sharing it with you now here on your podcast, but I don't go around, shouting it from the rooftops.
Right.
It's a pretty unpopular thing to say or feel, I think. Um, but yet here I am, and it's true. But other things that would be helpful, holding that space and listening without trying to fix or solve the problem. I think that's hard for when we have spouses or, significant others who are in tune with fixing things, finding the problem and fixing it, finding a solution. But rather just listen without judging. And sometimes there's not an easy answer, and it's okay just to kind of talk things through, bounce things around. And even asking the questions you're asking is very helpful. Like when you asked about what's it like when I hear our friends talking about aging parent issues. The fact that you're even aware that I might have some thoughts or feelings about that is significant and meaningful and greatly appreciated.
Are there other things that you would want to say to people who are in your position that are estranged from their parents as they age? What would you say to others in your situation?
I would say to them that they are not alone. Um, I've tried to normalize it for myself. And the more I read about it, you can go online, find all sorts of, there's support groups and statistics that will bear out that it's perfectly acceptable to cut ties with people who are harmful to your mental well-being, your mental health. Just because someone is related to you doesn't give them free rein to abuse you. Find a close friend, someone you can confide in. I would recommend treading lightly if it's another family member, because there tends to be baggage and strings attached when you talk to another family member about estrangement or about things going on related to that.
Mm-hmm.
If it makes sense for you, then perhaps seek professional help in the form of a therapist or counselor or group therapy. Um, Practice self-care. That's something you'd mentioned, and it's very important. That's going to look different for every
Mm-hmm.
person. Like I mentioned, I've started some new family traditions with Brad, and sometimes we plan a short trip out of town over the holidays because holidays can be difficult. They can be a bit isolating, but there's also a lot of peace that comes with cutting ties with family. It removes the inevitable family drama when one gets together with their relative. I don't care how great your family is, there's always going to be some kind of drama.
Oh, yes, there is.
And I don't miss that at all. And it's kind of worth mentioning, I think, that estrangement creates a complex and painful dynamic. And I think it's worth acknowledging that estranged parents have difficult experiences also. They have grief, they have struggles, and they have this silent loss that they're experiencing. So I do acknowledge that. It doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't mean I'm going to go and reconcile with my mom, but I do acknowledge that it's hurtful, and that's not my motivation. But I definitely do not endorse estrangement for everyone, but it has served me well. I don't have a lot of regrets around it.
Mhm.
Earlier on, maybe I did, but not now.
So this maybe is out of left field, but I just wonder, so if and well, when your mom does pass, like
Mhm.
if there was some kind of a service or something, would you feel that you should go? Would you go? Like, have you ever thought about that?
I have thought about that. I would feel that I should go for sure. I also believe that I will not go. I can tell you how that played out with my father. My father died about 9 years after I became estranged from him and the rest of my family. So, it was uncharted territory for me. He was buried in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and which is where he was from. And so I contacted, this might be useful, hopefully, perhaps, to someone in a similar situation. Contacted the funeral home, spoke plainly with the funeral director and explained the family situation. I didn't go into great detail. I just said, look, I'm estranged from my family. I know my father's service is happening there. And they were very accommodating to me. I can't say enough good things about how they handled a difficult situation, which leads me to believe that, as I was saying earlier, I don't think estrangement is that unusual.
Hmm.
Be willing to lay it out there if you feel like it's helpful. I let the funeral home know that the situation and that I wanted to see my father, but that I did not intend to participate in the funeral. And they arranged it so that I could arrive before the funeral, um, view my father's body, say my last goodbyes, such as it was, and never once had to run into or speak with any of the other family members I didn't want to encounter. So I was grateful to the funeral home for arranging that for me.
I remember that. I forgot about that, but now that you're telling me, I recall that. And you're
Mhm.
right, it must be not that out of the ordinary. They
They,
must make accommodations like that with pretty good regularity.
they didn't balk at it. They didn't seem confused or surprised. You know, I do have some concerns or reservations about the time when my mother passes because I feel like my brothers will have wised up. They may anticipate that I might try to do a similar thing and perhaps try to make it difficult just because they can. They may not. They might surprise me in a good way, but I don't know how easy it would be to do the same thing. Of course, it's a different funeral home too, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, I guess.
Mhm. It's just again another path that you have to navigate where there's not an expected way that it's going to go. And I just think probably for you, there's lots of things like that where there's no roadmap, or not no roadmap, but not a familiar one.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of peers I can lean on to say, how did you handle this? Because, there's just not a lot of examples of people I know in similar situations.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share that I didn't ask about?
One of the benefits or one of the outcomes of me cutting ties with my family is that I feel like I can be authentic. I feel like I can be who I am, be my real self. And that's something that I could never do when I was involved with my family, still in contact with them, talking with them. I never felt like I could be myself, and now I'm genuine. I'm who I am, and it's okay if they don't accept that.
You're awesome.
Oh, thank you. Well, so are you.
Well, I mean that. You're a dear longtime friend and you're a special person and you are always putting other people first. And, I know that this conversation, we talked about it for a while. Like, is it something that we wanted to do? And I know it's hard to kind of put yourself out there and share that really true side of something that's going on for you and how it impacts you. So I know it's important for other people to hear it and to connect with it. when I was listening to this geriatric therapist talk the other day about caregiving, and kind of one of the predominant themes was shared humanity, right? Common humanity, that we all feel less alone when we can identify with others who are wearing similar shoes. And so I just really appreciate you being here to share this point of view, which I feel like is not um, commonly addressed.
Well,
So
thank you. I feel like there's a lot of pressure for people to be nice and play nice. And being estranged, I can accept that maybe I'm not being nice, but I'm a good person. And that's what matters.
beautifully said.
Well,
Amen,
thank you.
sister. Well, thank you so much for taking time to be here and be open and honest and thoughtful with us. And I know that people will appreciate hearing your story and your point of view. If you're listening to this episode and it resonates with you, please share it with somebody else and seek out some support for yourself.
Thank
So,
you, Kirsten.
thank you, Jacqueline. Until next time. Who Gets the China is written and hosted by Kirsten Mao, produced by Aaron Bryce of Blue Ogden Productions. Our theme music is composed by Greg Fellman of Wind Sand Productions. Our cover art is by Jen Beam of Gigawatt Studio. For more stories and expert advice, follow along on Substack or at www.whogetsthechina.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might appreciate the conversation. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.